Welcome to Film at 50, a podcast that celebrates semi-centennials in the world of cinema. I'm your host, Brian Rowe. I'm very excited to welcome Marcus Gorman back to the podcast today to talk about Sounder, released 50 years ago in September of 1972. One of the 5 Best Picture nominees, Best Picture of 1972, of course. How are we doing, Marcus?
We're doing quite well. How are you?
Doing well. Thanks so much for being here again. Our last chat was Butterflies Are Free, I want to say, over the summer. Yeah, that was a fun chat. I've had you on a few times now. We've known each other since college at LMU. It's always a treat to have you on Film at 50.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for asking me to be a part of this. Having a very busy few weeks, but I'm glad I could squeeze this in.
Yeah.
This is good. Seymour Cinema, I'm unfamiliar with. This is what this is for.
Yeah, that's what this podcast is for. I mean, we just talked about The Emigrants a few days ago. I don't know how familiar you are with that movie, but it blew me away. I didn't know what it was going to be. It was also a Best Picture nominee of 1972. And I was like, this is why I do this podcast. I don't know if I would have ever sat down for a 3-hour, 15-minute foreign film about a family emigrating from Sweden to the United States. I don't know if I would ever fit that in. And it just was so great. And I'm like, okay, this is why I do this.
Totally. No, I talked about The Godfather on another podcast, and I looked at the top 5 again. I'm like, what is The Emigrants? Now I'm really curious because I'm like, I don't know about a 50-year-old thing. If I haven't heard of it, like, the Oscars Best Picture nominees, there's always like 1 or 2 a year that just disappear into the ether. And usually it's for a bad reason. But if it's great, then that means, if a foreign language film got nominated in such a big year as 1972, then I should definitely seek that out.
Yeah, and the first 30 to 40 minutes is really slow, and I was like, I'm just trusting that Best Picture nomination. I'm like, there's got to be a reason it's in here. And after you get past like the first act, it gets really interesting, and by the last half hour, you're just like gripped with tension and with excitement, and it's just really well done. It's a film that had been nominated for Best Foreign Language Film the year before because it came out in Sweden in 71, and then it didn't hit the United States until the fall of 72, and it just took on a life of its own. And it has a sequel called The New Land, which came out in 73, so I might watch that. I don't know. Apparently, that's even longer. I'm like, okay, great.
Oh boy.
But now we're talking Sounder today, which is much shorter than 3 hours. It is 1 hour and 45 minutes. I don't know about you. I felt like this one could have been a little longer. Like there was a lot of richness and texture to these characters and to the setting. And when it ended, I kind of felt like I kind of would have liked another half hour with this one. I don't know about you.
I would agree with that. Yeah, I would agree with that. I have not read the book, but I did read a synopsis, and I'm like, oh yeah, there's definitely more here. I see why they sort of whittled it down, because that's what you do when you adapt a book to a film. You want to do the big hits, but the thing is, the movie kind of just hangs out for 25 minutes at the top, and that's really the best part of the movie, where you're just sort of chilling in with these Louisiana sharecroppers and their family. And once the plot comes in, it's almost over.
We're on to the third act already.
Yeah, well, it just like not that, it's just it moved so quickly, not in a bad way. Yeah. But by the time it was done, I'm like, oh, that was it. Like, you told the full story. I'm just kind of surprised because, usually the reason I don't always gravitate toward period pieces, they tend to not be so character based. They tend to be more like ostentatious, or like they're focusing on the costumes or the set design. But this one was just sort of a chill movie about pretty intense things, but done in a more welcoming way that maybe is kind of groundbreaking in 1972 in a way that maybe it's not 50 years later.
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up, because I was thinking that too. I'm thinking, okay, in 2022, this film, it doesn't feel very groundbreaking. It's a G-rated film about this family. It's very quiet. And I'm like, interesting. Okay, Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Actress. I think part of it is we've looked at some films with Black leads on the podcast the last couple years, and most of those films are more indie, kind of action-oriented films, like Shaft, films like Blackula, which we talked about a few months ago. And this kind of a drama that takes itself very seriously about a family and their relationships, and taking seriously this young boy who just wants to get a better education. That kind of a story on film for like a widespread audience, I don't know if a lot of those stories were being told in the early 70s. So I think that's why a big part of it, the reason this movie was so groundbreaking in 72, like Black audiences were not being able to see themselves in a story like this one. They were seeing more films like Shaft and Blackula, which are fun and are, terrific films in their own rights. But this kind of a drama with Black leads wasn't really being made at that time.
Not at all. If this, like 10 years earlier, this would be about a white family and done by like John Ford. Well, that'll be more 20, 30 years before. But yeah, it has a cool John Ford feel to it, even if that's not intentional.
Yeah. And it's directed by Martin Ritz, who got an Oscar nomination for directing HUD with Paul Newman about a decade before, 9 years before. And I looked at his filmography yesterday, and he has like a lot of credits of really terrific films, and including, I haven't watched it yet, but he has another film coming up that we're going to talk about in like 2 months called Pete and Tilly, which was also an Oscar nominated movie of 72. And one of the first episodes I did for this podcast for 1970, 2 years ago, was The Great White Hope, starring James Earl Jones, which is another terrific film with a Black lead, and was like really, like a boxing movie that really floored me. It's very emotional. It's very well done. And so Martin Ritz seems to be one of these directors you can kind of count on to tell a story well. He doesn't overdo it with a lot of flourishing. Like, he just likes to tell great stories, keep himself out of it, let the actors kind of rule the day.
So how much do you know about Martin Ritz? Like, if you covered it a couple years ago, so you probably like covered his background. He's a fascinating person.
No, we talked about James Earl Jones in that episode.
I can go through this.
Covered Martin Ritz.
I can go through this pretty quickly. So he's Jewish. He grew up in the Great Depression in New York. He played football in college in South Carolina, and he noticed the distinction between the two, and was shocked by like the distinction between like wealth and poverty. And so he really decided, I want to make stories about inequality. He was a playwright for the FDR's New Deal Works Progress Administration. He worked for the Federal Theater Project, which changed how we look at American theater. He was a leftist filmmaker. He never admitted to being a communist. He did the group theater where he met Elia Kazan, and he was cast as an understudy in A Golden Boy, huge thing. And he filled in for Kazan sometimes teaching at the theater, joined the Air Force in World War II, and then he got caught up in the blacklist. He was never named. He was directing television at the time. He was never named, but one person said, I have proof you gave money to this organization. So he was blacklisted from television, and to make money, he started working at the Actors Studio and taught there. It was Counterattack, the publication that named him. And so then he returned to theater because he couldn't do television anymore, went to film. And then he started making all these movies that we're talking about now. He made a lot of Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward movies, nominated 3 times for the Palme d'Or. He made The Front. Do you know this movie?
The one with Woody Allen? Woody
Allen and Zero Mostel, which is about the blacklist.
Oh, right. Okay.
And then he did a TV movie of Awake and Sing, a play by Clifford Odets, who was also part of this giant New York world and the HUAC situation. So he has made all of these movies about inequality. I was disappointed to see this directed by a white man, but then I started looking into it and knowing what I know more from like Kazan's books that I've read. If any white man is going to make this movie, Martin Ritz seems like the right guy. He has really good taste. He seems to be really sympathetic to things that are outside of his perspective. And maybe that's what works about this. I would have loved to have seen this from a Black filmmaker.
Right.
However, it seems like he sort of got out of the way and let it happen and let, say, Taj Mahal do an incredible score. And let the actors just sort of live in these characters and just let everything sort of waft in. You mentioned Taj Mahal, which was the first soundtrack ever patterned after a field recording, featuring a sweet montage succession of hums, moans, claps, and plucketed fragments, all performed in the key of the gospel blues song Needed Time.
Like you could tell, like watching the film, that there was this distinct soundtrack to this movie that really enhanced it.
Yeah, actually did not know what the story was about. I had never read the book,
Mm-hmm.
but I know the score. My mother
Oh,
loves Taj Mahal, so I recognize some of this.
oh, interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and yes, go for it.
oh, but yeah, but the score, I feel like if the score had been too schmaltzy, it didn't have any flavor to it, I think that would have brought the movie down. So I like that
Totally.
element to it too.
Yeah, when they get to the ending, it's done in silence, which is
Mm-hmm.
surprising. And I had the same thought. I'm like, God, if they overdid this, like, what if like John Williams and Spielberg era had done this? And then I see that Spielberg, Williams was thanked in the opening credits
Right.
for
I
one
saw
of the
that too.
songs. I'm like, huh. So he is like capable of not overblowing things. Nothing against John Williams. He's an
Yeah.
incredible composer,
Yeah.
but he is known for being attached to very bombastic and
Yeah.
schmaltzy scores.
Which it sometimes works. I mean,
Totally.
every time I watch ET, like the music of the last 10 minutes is so big,
Yeah.
but I can't imagine it without that score either. So John Williams is a part of a lot of projects before he works with Spielberg. I feel like a lot of people just kind of put him with Spielberg. Like that's when he got his, it's like, no, he was doing lots of great music. We talked about Fiddler on the Roof last year. He won an
Yeah.
Oscar for that. I think he got his first nomination in the late 60s. So yeah, he's been around. We're talking about him coming up here. There's another film we're going to look at that he did the score for. But you mentioned Rit, yeah, being a white filmmaker making this black story. And I mean, we've talked about that on the podcast before. Like, why couldn't this movie be directed by a woman? And it was a different time in the early 70s. I do think if you were to make Sounder now, you would absolutely have a black filmmaker tell this story. But I think you're right. I think Martin Ritt is a kind of filmmaker who allows the story to play out in a way. He doesn't put himself into the movie like maybe like a tour director would. And I mean, he really did capture some excellent performances in this film.
And Wonderful World of Disney did remake
That's
this
right.
in
I saw that.
2003. And guess who directed it?
Oh, I saw that Paul Winfield's in it. Like, but who
Directed by Kevin Hooks, who is our lead.
Oh,
And Paul Winfield plays the teacher in the remake.
oh, cool. Okay. So Kevin Hooks, who really is the lead
Mm-hmm.
of 72 Sounder. Not, if you were to go off of the Oscar nominations, you might think he's not. But this goes back also too. It's like when the younger character, like a son or daughter, is a kind of a no name, we don't really know who they are, the lead of the movie, the parents, even if they're not in it as much as he is, can still get the actor and actress nominations because they're a little bit more well known, have a little bit more stature, and that's what happened here, I think. Yeah. But kind of moving into what we thought of the film, I have some very interesting kind of trivia about it. Like, so you weren't familiar with the book. I read that the book is more about the dog. Did you see that?
Yes, sort of. Like the symbolism is stronger. Sort of. Have you read The Grapes of Wrath?
Yes, in high school.
Yeah. So like the chapters trade off.
Yeah.
There's a story of them going west and all these things happening, and then the other ones are more about the world and the images. And early chapters like about a turtle. So I'm assuming that they sort of check in with him with Sounder, and that the metaphors and symbols filter through him really well. It is a story, like it's not like the dog's the lead character. This isn't like Milo and Otis. Think of it more like, I guess, Old Yeller. Old Yeller is not the star of Old Yeller.
Right.
Old Yeller is the focus of it, but it is about the family and the boy. So,
right.
And I know, and I looked, more bad things happened to the dog in the book.
Oh.
Which would have made this not a G-rated movie.
Okay.
I would totally guess.
Yeah. I mean, I think you can get away with more for the G rating in the early 70s than you could today. Like,
oh, yeah.
Today, you just like a character looks at someone the wrong way and it gets a PG. But I feel like I don't think the movie would have been as good if the focus was more on the relationship with the dog, and that was like the sole focus throughout the whole movie. I like that it's more about the dad and the son visiting his father in prison and just kind of keeping the family dynamic as strong as it can be without that parental figure around. And I don't think that I think the dog's inclusion into the narrative is necessary, but I don't think the focus should have been that.
No, gosh, no.
It would have been, I don't know if it would have been an Oscar nominee. That's usually, looked at as more of a family movie that isn't really considered for awards. But the screenwriter, Lon Elder III, it was kind of his decision to move the focus away from the dog. He was kind of reluctant to take on this assignment. He wasn't sure if he wanted to do it, but the producer, Robert Radnitz, and director Martin Ritt convinced him to work with them. He wanted to keep Sounder accurate in its historical context and not go off on any present day fantasies. So I think the screenplay is pretty good. I mean, it's tight, and he doesn't. I feel like I was watching this. I'm like, every scene feels necessary. It didn't feel like he was going off on tangents that didn't have anything to do with the main, trajectory of the story. I like that we have like quiet moments of the son just like sitting in that classroom and, thinking like, what if I could go here every day? Like, what if what if I could go to this school? And how that plays into the last scene, I thought was really moving. So that worked really well. I think the screenplay is pretty solid.
Yeah, and guess what he gets out of it? He becomes a part of history. His nomination. He's the first Black man nominated for writing.
Really?
That's what my research says.
Oh, I didn't see that. That's crazy to me. The Oscars go back to 1927, 28, and that's kind of pathetic.
Yep,
that's the first Black screenwriter to get nominated.
Wow. Yeah, well, we have a weird country here, and we had 34 years of a really, really troubling code that I think ruined American film forever.
You mean like from 34 to 68?
That's right.
The production code. Yeah, the Hays Code. I'm trying to watch some more of those films from early 30s before that's put into place, and they're so interesting. Like they could get away with a lot more.
I just watched a pre-code movie from King Vidor. It was a little racist, but it was also good, which kind of sucks. It's called Bird of Paradise with Dolores Del Rio.
Okay.
But yeah, watch pre-code stuff. They're wild, especially their comedies.
Yeah, one of my favorite films of the 30s is I Am a Fugitive from a Chain Gang from 1932. Yes. And I've always asked myself, why do I love this movie so much more than most, like, other prison films, gangster films of this era? But like, I think it's because it came out before 34, and it just is a little bit more alive, and they're not, it's not like an R-rated film, but like there's something kind of dangerous about it that you don't get in like a 1937 film.
Yeah, I watched Mystery of the Wax Museum, which was remade into House of Wax, but this is a 1933 film, and it's way more sinister and violent and horny than anything over the next 35 years.
I don't think I've seen the one with Vincent Price. That's the 50s remake.
Yes. This one is 1932, 33, and it's a 2-strip Technicolor, so it's in red and green. It's really cool looking. I TiVoed it off TCM. Like, oh no, they colorized it. Oh no, this is just pre-Technicolor.
So wait, when it came out in 33, it had color?
It had 2-strip color. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Because I just made a video and I talked about a film called Becky Sharp came out in 1935, and it was the first film that I think it was called 5-strip Technicolor, where it was like full color the whole movie, starring Miriam Hopkins. She got an Oscar nomination for Best Actress. So there were films before, live action films before that had animation. It just wasn't the new kind of Technicolor that came into focus in 35.
Yeah, totally. Audiences did from like the late 20s to the early 30s, they rejected color because it kind of looks freaking weird. And also they're used to black and white at this point. It's we think of Gone with the Wind as the first color film, but that's 1939. That's way late. It's just the first giant color film. And that's the film that cannot be stopped.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny we mentioned color because I was watching Sounder and I was like, I wonder what this would look like in black and white. I almost feel like because it's such a quiet movie, like I almost could like sense it being like, those beautiful looking like black and white films from the early 60s, like Mockingbird. And I almost feel, I was almost like, I wonder if this movie would be even more beautiful in black and white.
And it would have fit the era because the book does not actually set a place or a time, but the movie decides 1933 Louisiana, and films would have looked black and white.
Right.
You could have pulled a Martin Scorsese with The Aviator and make it using the technology that was around back then. I'm sure this does not seem like an expensive movie, so that seems like a cost prohibitive measure.
Yeah.
But this is pretty close to black and white anyway. It's really muted of colors, which is intentional.
Yeah.
And it probably would not have gotten a nomination had it been in black and white.
Yeah, well, I mean, we talked about Last Picture Show, and like I cannot imagine that movie in color. It's a character in the film. It's what makes what it is. Really, it's so beautiful. But you're not seeing a lot of black and white in the 70s. I mean, I'm trying to think. I don't think I've watched a film for 72 that's in black and white. Like it's kind of a no-no. The fact that Bogdanovich on his second film was allowed to shoot Last Picture Show in black and white still kind of astounds me. It's not like he was a older director, bunch of credits behind him. Like it was his second movie, and his first one was pretty small, a movie called Targets. I looked up, I was trying to see, did Martin Ritt ever try to make it in black? I don't think it was even on their minds. I think it was always just going to be color, but not to say the color's bad. I just was like, I was thinking, because of that, sometimes when I'm watching a period film, I think to myself, could this be black and white? Would that be better? I think it would have been nice, but we get a great cast in this, starting with Cicely Tyson, who just passed away last year, correct?
Yes.
She passed away. Didn't she die like the week her memoir came out?
Right after. She was doing she did like the most bare minimum of press for it. I'm like, God bless her for even doing this at all. Yeah. And then immediately croaked. And I don't mean that to be a bad word, just R.I.P. Cicely Tyson. Fabulous person, extremely important to Broadway history as well as American film history, and especially television history.
Reading about her life yesterday was really interesting because, I mean, you go down her filmography and you think, oh, well, she wasn't in a whole lot of movies, like theatrical films, but boy, did she make a huge impression in television, winning Emmys and on the stage. We're going to talk about her a little bit more at the end, but I've seen her in a few films. I want to say they've all been supporting roles, and to see her be the lead of a movie for the first time, really exciting. And she plays Rebecca Morgan in this. The director almost didn't hire her because he thought she was too pretty.
Actual model Cicely Tyson.
And you can, I mean, she's always been gorgeous. I mean, like watching this movie, you can see that they had to work to like kind of strip down that beauty in Cicely Tyson, because she's just a striking looking woman. But I think she's bringing something to this character I don't know if any other actress could have. Like she has such strength to her in everything she does, and it just works so well with her character. I thought she was really great in this.
Yeah, and like you talk about television, that's where a lot of Black stories ended up for a long time, and it's still very true. I watched a miniseries that she was in called The Women of Brewster Place, produced by Oprah Winfrey from 1989, which has a million giant Black actors in it, like Lynn Whitfield and Mary Alice, Leon, Glenn Plummer, and Oprah's the lead. And
this is the late 80s.
This is 1989. Based off of a popular novel. And I watched this the other night because I'm like, this has every Black actor from the 80s in this movie, and I'm shocked I haven't even heard of it. But this is what I'm talking about. We're both movie people, and less like we watch television, but not the same. So there's this whole world of TV movies and TV miniseries that we just don't know about that are made for people that are not us. Because we are right now two white men talking about Sounder and Cicely Tyson, and we're going to do our best, but we're going to miss a lot of things because she's a part, like this is my confession. I've never seen Roots.
Oh, okay. I watched Roots in middle school. We watched,
I don't know if we watched
the whole thing, but we watched part of it.
I think I've seen part of it, and it was middle school, but like that's one of her big roles. And I would have no idea because I'm a film person. Luckily, I'm also a theater fan, so I know her reputation via Broadway.
Right. Would you say her reputation in theater is the highest of the three mediums?
I would say for widest reach television.
Widest reach television.
Because you and I both looked through filmography, and it's nonstop television.
It's a lot of TV.
There are these bangers in here that I'm like, oh, I've never gotten around to that. I need a reason to. Thank you for this. But yeah, it's stuff that would have passed us by.
Yeah. That's also why I do this podcast is, someone like Cicely Tyson, I need to see more of her work, and watching Sounder and talking about her here, it makes me want to seek out more of what she did in television and on film, and just read up more. I like want to read her memoir now. Like just watching Sounder, I just want to know more about her life, and it sounds so fascinating.
Yeah, now I want to like read Trip to Bountiful, because Tony winning play, and then they revive it on Broadway in the last decade,
yeah,
and they change it from a white cast to a black cast, and they say, well, the story is not about color, so we can do this regardless. And so she was also in the TV movie of it.
Okay, yeah, and she won the Tony Award for Trip to Bountiful, right? Yeah,
in I believe a different role.
Oh, okay, yeah,
I could be wrong.
But yeah, she's really great in this. And then we have Paul Winfield, who gets a Best Actor nomination for a really great role. He's not in the movie very much. That surprised me.
What a weird year for Best Actor, because Godfather like is full of supporting noms, and then Marlon Brando is nominated for Best Actor in a supporting role.
His presence hangs over the whole film.
So does Al Pacino's.
Yeah. Al Pacino should be in lead.
Yes.
That's always been weird to me, that he's just like bunched together with Duvall and Caan and supporting actor. I think he was upset by it, and that's why he didn't go to the ceremony that year. Like he was like, I'm not a supporting actor in the Godfather.
No. And then they do it wrong. Like this is a completely different kind of movie. Requiem for a Dream. Ellen Burstyn gets nominated for Best Actress and loses to Julia Roberts.
Right.
Had she been a supporting actress, she would have won. Pretty likely.
Ooh, I've never heard that before, because even though she's not in the entire movie, I've always felt that was a lead performance. I mean, I guess if you did it by screen time, she's only in a specific amount of that movie. But even when she's not in Requiem, you're just thinking about her character, and she's in like bits all throughout. I want to say, don't we like see her in the beginning and we see her at the end? And but yeah, when you get those stories that have like 3 or 4, storylines throughout, I feel like you can always make the case. And I feel like today, her people would have said, I mean, if I've always go back to Viola Davis and Fences, if that can get supporting actress, you can make some tweaks and yeah.
And like, I'm looking at
that was a lead female performance of Fences, and I'm like,
I'm looking at Ellen Burstyn's year. Oh, that is Requiem 99 or 2000?
2000.
Okay, so this is a complicated year. So shift her to supporting actress, where Marcia Gay Harden won for Pollock, which is a lead performance.
That's a lead performance.
However, that would have still taken away the Oscar from Kate Hudson in Almost Famous, which I cared about more than anything in the world that year.
Okay, you were upset on Oscar night when Kate Hudson did not win?
Correct. Because Marcia Gay Harden should not have been in that category.
Because she should have been in lead, but it was such a tiny movie. There was no way she was going to get in lead.
Right. Well, Almost Famous is my second favorite movie, so I can't be objective about this. Yeah,
that was an interesting Oscar race in that of the 5 nominees, they all won one of the major precursor awards.
Yeah.
Except for Marcia Gay Harden, who won the Oscar.
Good Lord. What a chaos year. That was a double Soderbergh year.
Yeah. And I want to say, I'm getting soon to making it. I'm doing a video about the year that Tilda Swinton won Best Supporting Actress for Michael Clayton. And I want to say that's another year where like almost all of the 5 nominated for Best Supporting Actress won something before, and nobody knew going into the night. That happens here and there, and it's always exciting. I want to say it happened recently for something. But when it's just the same person winning everything, it's just like, go to sleep. It's so boring.
Like Renee Zellweger for Judy.
Renee Zellweger for Judy. Just like that movie didn't get into like any other category except for makeup, I want to say. And she just coasted for months. And I'm like, there were great performances by women in 2019. Like, did you tell me there's nobody who can get in here?
Paul, go for it.
Oh, I was just gonna say, kind of going back to Oscars for Sounder. I love that this movie got those 4 big nominations. I don't think that this film could have ever been a threat to win any of those.
No, I feel not in the Godfather Cabaret year.
Yeah, I feel like Liza Minnelli and Marlon Brando, like, I don't know how you beat those performances. I mean, I guess the only thing you could say about Brando is he's not in enough for the movie. Like, maybe we could have given it to someone else, but there's not another nominated performance of Best Actor that's just like so incredible, like you'd have to go that way. So I do think like the performances in Sounder are quieter, and both Cicely Tyson and Paul Winfield are not in the movie as much as some of the other ones, so that might hurt them. But the fact that they got nominated for this is really a really big deal. The first time in Academy Awards history that a black man and a black woman were nominated from the same movie together at the Oscars. That had never happened before.
God damn.
I mean, I read that, I went, what? I mean, I know it's pathetic, the history of black performers being nominated at the Oscars. It would have dropped by now. I've been spending the last week researching the life and career of Angela Bassett, and we're talking about her nomination for What's Love Got to Do with It. And it's been such a great week, just kind of learning more about her career and everything. But reading up on that nomination, I'm like, that was like the 6th time a woman was nominated for best lead actress at the Oscars in 1994. I'm like, what? It's just, it just rips my heart out. It's ridiculous. There's so many great performances every year by black actresses that just are overlooked, and it makes me sad.
Yeah, this is the Lupita Nyong'o for us situation.
Yeah, one of my biggest hit tweets of all time was something about how Lupita Nyong'o should have been nominated for Us, and it was like 5,000 likes or something. I was like, okay, I'm not the only one who thinks this.
But you and we entered this movie knowing Paul Winfield from like Mars Attacks and the Terminator.
So I looked him up and I'm like, oh, I know his filmography a little bit more than Tyson, but they're all in, kind of minor supporting roles in big blockbusters like Mars Attacks, which, anyone who was born in the early 80s went and saw Mars Attacks in the theater. You weren't missing that one. He's really fun in that one, though. I know, like when I think of Mars Attacks, he's one of the actors I think about first. Like he has a great kind of comedic performance in that.
Yeah, and I've never seen Samuel Fuller's White Dog, but now I can't wait to watch it.
Ooh, yeah. Isn't that like his last film or one of the last ones?
I don't know. I just know the plot.
Yeah, no, that came out, like, you think he has like a big, is it called The Big Red One or something right before? Like he has like a bigger kind of epic film, and then White Dog is a little bit more of like it's more stripped down, kind of a more, not kind of like an indie or like movie, and right. I've heard some great things about it. So yeah, that if I'm still doing the podcast in 10 years, we'll get to it.
Yeah,
I think it's 82.
yeah, and like oh, it's the dude from Dennis the Menace, the movie. That's the wrong way to be looking at this.
Yeah.
So I can't wait to watch Damnation Alley. That's the one I'm most interested in of his filmography.
Damnation Alley. What's that?
From 1977.
Oh, 77.
Following World War III, 4 survivors at a desert military installation attempt to drive across the desolate wasteland of America to Albany, hoping to find survivors. Using specially built vehicles to protect themselves against the freakish weather, mutated plant and animal life, and other dangers encountered along the way. It's him and George Peppard and Jan Michael Vincent. Yeah, sounds like a blast. And Jackie Earle Haley.
Oh, young Jackie Earle Haley.
Yeah,
that's
Bad
awesome.
News Bears style.
Bad News Bears style. Every time I hear that name, I just think of little children.
As you should. No, it's the Dylan Baker and Happiness situation. He did it so well that it's completely altered his career to just playing weird creeps.
Yeah.
Well-deserved Oscar nomination.
That was one of the last films I wrote about for the Loyolan, was Little Children. That was the fall of 06. I was still going to LMU. And I was like, if this movie could get like 3 nominations, let's get it in for Winslet, for Haley, and for screenplay. And it got the 3. And I was so happy.
Yeah.
That's a great movie. But so the movie Sounder did very well at both with critics and at the box office. Received critical acclaim. Reviewers praised it as a welcome antidote to the contemporaneous wave of Black films we were getting at the time, like Shaft, like some of the Blaxploitation films of the era. Some were considered low quality, exploitative. The film's depiction of a loving family was hailed as an accomplishment for Black filmmakers and audiences. Roger Ebert gave the film 4 stars, said this is a film every family needs to see. Both Siskel and Ebert placed the film on their top 10 lists of 1972. So, for such kind of a quiet movie like this, like it was doing very well with critics, and the movie did very well at the box office. It was made for less than $1 million, and it grossed over 17 million.
That's why it's in the Best Picture top 5. That's a giant hit.
That's huge. Yeah. And this comes out at the end of September of 72. So it's just like the prime time for like Oscar consideration movie. You know, back in 72, it would take a few weeks for a movie to really catch on, especially a smaller one like this. But I think like it probably was doing very well October, November, December, right in that time where they're voting and things. So it would make sense that it would have gotten in. So it was the 10th highest grossing movie of 72.
Hell yeah. And probably a lot of kids like coming back to school saw it with their family because maybe they had read the book in the last 3 years or they were assigned it.
Maybe they were reading the book. Probably was assigned for, you know, I don't know. Was it more like middle school or high school age? Maybe both. I don't know.
Maybe both. It won the Newbery Award.
Newbery Award. Doesn't it say that in the credits?
Yeah.
Of Sounder, it says like by the Newbery Award winning author or something. I was like, oh, okay.
Well, no, because I mean the thing is like that's the big conversation about Black cinema is how much needs to be about pain and suffering and trauma, and that's a conversation we have like on film Twitter, whatever you consider that, constantly. That you know you can just make a Black film that's just kind of chill. Like there's a lot of pretty horrible things that happen in this, but it treats it in a very pragmatic way. So like it's a story about like a bunch of sharecroppers. You know, they can't seem to hunt their food very well. The dad steals some ham from a smokehouse. They send him away to a labor camp for a year. In the book, it's several years.
Okay.
And so the kid spends several years looking for him and ages as he does this. And
the wife is not allowed. The wife is not allowed to see him.
The wife is not allowed to see him.
Which is a really devastating scene. Cicely Tyson there, she's asking, can I go see my husband? And they say no. And so she has to send her son in.
Yeah, son in. And then he like, here's a 4-layer cake. And the sheriff destroys the cake looking for like a file or something. And then the dad says like, I love you, son, but never come back here. And then he gets sent away.
Yeah.
The preacher, the sheriff won't tell the preacher where he's being put away because the sheriff says it's against the rules, which it's not. And then the one nice white woman in town, you know, tries to steal the file for them and kind of gets in trouble, but gets away with it.
Yeah.
And then they finally figured it out. The kid, you know, makes his pilgrimage. He looks for him. He can't seem to find him at the specific camp at Wishbone. A guard strikes him with an iron and he freaks out. He tends to his wounds at a school where he sees a non-segregated school. It's like, wait a minute, I can learn this way. So I see why this is a really good book for children of any age, color, or creed. And yeah, I mean, because we're more talking around the movie, so I'm just kind of racing through the synopsis because I think it's kind of neat. And then the dad finally comes back home and he's injured because some dynamite destroyed his leg,
which got him out early.
Got him out early, and the kid's like, oh, I guess I won't go to this Black school, like miles upon miles away. But the dad's like, no, you clearly are not built for this. Like, nothing wrong with sharecropping, but you seem to be a reader, and I want you to do better than what we have. Like, our boss seems okay, but this is not your life. And that's a really neat story to have in 1972 in a Black perspective. We've had plenty of white stories like this about like white poverty and the Depression and whatnot. But there are these traumatic events in this movie that are just kind of treated as everyday life, which is kind of neat. It's not like making you suffer through every second of it. It's still making its point, but it's not like this movie doesn't feel like homework at all, which is really special. That's what people are responding to, that it kind of can live in both worlds. And that's what I was really charmed by, if that's the right word.
Yeah, it's not like some movies can be like an historical record and you feel like you're working for the movie. And that's not the case here. There are emotional flourishes, like you mentioned. Probably the most emotional scene is when he comes back, and the way that Cicely Tyson runs towards him, you just feel like the absolute love in her eyes, and in the way she's just like speeding as fast as she can, and we hang on their hug for a while and you really feel it. That's one of the best acted moments in the movie. I really like that part. And
again, with no score.
Great
job, everybody.
John Williams, that score would have been
Jesus,
10 years later, it would have been very big.
Or like Elmer Bernstein or something.
It's like, is it Forrest Gump or what's the like when they like hug and then the music goes blah, and it's just like like the music is telling you get up out of your seat and clap.
Which is fine. Like, you know, like for instance, I love Indian cinema, which is just the most earnest emotional stuff ever, regardless of genre. But you know, you need something a little more laid back for things like this. And not that like, you know, movies can't be about black trauma, but black movies can be about anything, and they should be about anything. And a lot of mainstream black movies are not really allowed or financed to be anything but historical tragedy about slavery,
right,
or other things, or the civil rights, or comedies. Those are really the only two real bankable things, according to a lot of really myopic major studios, which is why these stories flourished on television, where you and I generally did not see them.
Right. Yeah, and I feel like that's gotten better today. Like you are allowed to tell stories about different kinds of the, you know, the Black experience. And I'm just reading today as we're recording this, all sorts of raves for The Woman King, starring Viola Davis, which is an historical film that has, it looks like a lot of drama, a lot of action. It's a great mix of genres, and that will have opened by the time this drops. And I'm excited to see it. So they're out there. Yeah. But it's hard. I mean, it's hard for any movie to get made, right? So if the people with the money are like, I don't think I'll make my money back, you know, they might go look somewhere else. And in a time now that's so big on IP and Disney taking over everything, anytime we get a film about the Black experience, that's like, you know, gives us something new and fresh, and like that's always something to celebrate, I think.
Totally. And I just covered The Woman King for the Seattle Times. I cover film, theater, and burlesque for a new online website called The Ticket as a part of Seattle Times. And what's neat about The Woman King is that it is a war epic made by and for Black women.
Okay.
Not a lot of action. No, I haven't seen it yet. No, I sorry, I preview stuff. I don't review stuff because I work in local theater. I think that's bad karma. Okay. So I'd rather talk about things that I'm interested in. This is an arts events calendar with top picks. But the weird thing, because The Woman King is, I would say it got made because Gina Prince Bythewood made The Old Guard at Netflix, which was a huge hit, right. And then decided not to come back from the sequel. They still have a Black female director, so that's good. So this is sort of her blank check movie, and that's really fantastic to me. However, it is one of the writers. Have you seen who wrote it?
No, who wrote
Maria Bello?
What?
Maria Bello wrote the story, the original story for The Woman King, and brought it to Gina.
Maria Bello from A History of Violence in the Cooler.
Yes.
Wrote the story. So what does that mean? Not the script? Like she just wrote like the treatment?
I think she did one of the drafts. I didn't dig in too much because
I didn't know she wrote scripts. That's
exactly.
So cool.
So she's like, I like this woman from history. I'm gonna tell her story.
Cool.
And I'm gonna intentionally find a Black female director for this.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, Viola Davis, if you can get her to come aboard, that's always helpful, because she's amazing. I went to Disneyland in July, and for the fireworks, I was watching the fireworks. I looked over on my left, and there's Viola Davis standing a few people over, and I was like, oh my God. I was like,
oh, nice. Right, because she has Disney money from that Shonda Rhimes show, which also co-stars Cicely Tyson.
And then I looked into it after I got home, and I'm like, oh, she's like a huge Disneyland buff. Like she goes all the time, and people have seen her all the time. So she goes there.
Awesome. That's I love hearing that.
Yeah. But so yeah, The Woman King, and in 1972, I could see Sounder just being something different. The kind of Black film that audiences were getting were, you know, some of them are really good. I really enjoyed Shaft last year. That's a great movie, but not a lot like Sounder. And so it did very well with awards. It wasn't just the Oscars, which I'll mention, but Cicely Tyson won Best Actress from the National Board of Review, Kansas City Film Critics, and National Society of Film Critics. She was first runner-up from the New York Film Critics. So this wasn't just like a last minute, hey, let's give Tyson an Oscar nomination for actress. Like she was winning a lot of those critics prizes too. So they were noticing her in this. And in a year that had Liza Minnelli in Cabaret, which is just like a dazzling performance from beginning to end, that Tyson was winning some of these big critics prizes is really cool. Like that they were noticing her before we got into the Oscar nomination. Let's see, what else did she get? So she got the Golden Globe nomination. And then most promising newcomer male at the Golden Globes, Kevin Hooks was nominated there.
Mm-hmm.
Paul Winfield did not get in at the Golden Globes.
No.
So I wonder what happened between then and the Oscars. Maybe like more and more people were seeing Sounder in early 73 and just there was just a lot of love for it. I would say Paul Winfield, because he's not in the movie a whole lot, like I would say he probably slipped in there for like the 5th slot.
Totally. And the Oscars are always weird. And also, as we've learned, the Golden Globes are also weird and shouldn't be trusted. But also, I really miss their best newcomer. That's a great prize. That's the one that actually has historical relevance in the history of the Golden Globes, outside of just being a predictor for the Oscars. And Kevin Hooks, I love movies where I'm watching actors who later become directors. And Kevin Hooks becomes a major filmmaker. He makes Strictly Business, Passenger 57, Fled, Black Dog.
Oh, cool.
And now he does TV. He's responsible for the look and feel of Prison Break, which is a really fun show. He worked on This Is Us, Preacher, Castle, Bones, 24, and Lost and Saint Elsewhere.
Oh, cool.
And after this, he acted for a little bit. Like he's most known for The White Shadow, the basketball television show. And then he's in Inner Space and Takedown, but he's a filmmaker now, which is really, really neat to watch. Like I like watching.
I wonder if he ever directed Cicely Tyson in something.
I'm pretty sure he did.
Did he? He did a lot of TV.
And he definitely directed Paul Winfield in the remake of Sounder.
The remake of Sounder. So he makes Passenger 57, Black Dog, these big studio action films. And then for Disney in 2003, he makes a remake of Sounder. That's kind of great. They probably came to him with that. And he was like, oh, that'd be interesting to do. You don't see that very often. Like a director remaking a movie he acted in decades before.
Yeah, I like sometimes like a TV movie, or that happens a lot in theater.
Oh, okay.
Like the person comes back to Broadway after 15, 20 years later, back to the thing that made them famous, and now they've taken on a different role. Yeah,
because I feel like it'd be kind of boring to act in a remake of something you acted in before, but to come at it as a director for the second time, like it's like a new pair of eyes on the material. I mean, I'm sure there's only so much you could do with it if it was Wonderful World of Disney. But
totally.
If he could have made a theatrical film, maybe he could have done more with it. But I'd be curious to see it. So then the Oscar nominations come out. It gets Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Actress for Cicely Tyson, Best Actor for Paul Winfield, and Best Picture. Best Actress was always going to be Liza Minnelli. I don't know. I mean, the fact that Cabaret gets 8 wins tells there's like a lot of love for that. And that movie came out in February of 72. So it was like a long stretch. It's not like today where you have to wait until like November for your movie to come out to be considered, basically. I mean, we'll see what happens with Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is still getting a lot of buzz, and maybe that'll get in there for. It
will not. I want to temper people's expectations now. Michelle Yeoh is in a movie that came out in April. It's not going to last a year. It's also like, yes, it is A24's highest grossing movie, but that's still like $50 million. It is a cult hit. She is, again, in the Lupita Nyong'o in Us spot, which is another February genre release. She's in the Toni Collette in Hereditary spot, which is like a June release. But it's not going to happen.
There's a lot of love for it. I mean,
there's a lot of love.
I feel like Yeoh could get in.
Yes, screenplay and Yeoh, and maybe editing. I think that's it.
Okay, I mean, we'll see what happens at the the precursor ceremonies and things. We'll see what. I mean, I think that'll be telling. Like if it does okay or doesn't place at a couple of the big precursors, then I think it's done. But
we have Amsterdam. We have the Fabelmans coming out this year. There's a lot of stuff that's going to completely overshadow any independent cult movie.
But what's really interesting about the 73 ceremony for Best Picture, the last of the 5 films nominated for Best Picture is Sounder, which came out in September. October to December of 72, any movie released in those last 3 months was not nominated for picture. Imagine that happening today. If now all 5 of the films be nominated for a picture or whatever, like they'd all already come out. That would never happen today.
Remember when dramas would come out at all parts of the year?
Yeah, like June.
Oh my God! Can we go back to that? I hate the onslaught during the Christmas season because like at least 10 get lost, even for me who watches at least a movie a day.
It's kind of ridiculous. And, you know, I've been following all the coverage of the film festivals. Telluride and Venice just ended. And then while we're recording this, Toronto's getting started up. And I'm just like, I read about all of these movies and they all sound so great. And I'm like, some of them are going to get lost in the final few weeks of the year because there's just so much to see. Right. And then you have to catch up with everything. I don't think that was the case so much in 72. Like, I don't think they were kind of released sporadically throughout the year. They weren't releasing Godfather and Cabaret Christmas Day. Like they could come out when they wanted to come out. And it didn't matter so much back then. You could release a great movie in March and win Best Picture.
Well, also we had, Platform and Roadshow releasing.
Right. And movies would play for a long time.
Yeah. I was talking to a friend and she was like, yeah, Star Wars played for 7 years in my hometown. I'm like, what? Good Lord.
7 years is like the one screen theater.
Right. Just kind of kept on coming back.
They push it out for Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they just bring. I mean, I could see being like owning a small theater, and you're like, well, I could put that new drama in. Why don't I just play Star Wars for another month? I know I'll get people to come. But so as I said before, Paul Winfield and Cicely Tyson first pairing from one film to be nominated at the same Oscar ceremony. That did not happen again until 1994, when we got Lawrence Fishburne and Angela Bassett, both Oscar nominated for What's Love Got to Do with It. The third time it's happened was just last year, Chadwick Boseman and Viola Davis for Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. That has only happened 3 times. I can't believe it.
Again, Chadwick being put in the wrong category.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Yeah,
because I think everybody agrees it would have been nice for him to have won, but then I saw Anthony Hopkins in The Father, and I was like,
incredible! It might be his best performance.
I mean, he'll always be Hannibal Lecter in Silence, and he's just so great in that. But like, just the risks he takes and the challenge of that role, and the last scene is just it just absolutely tore me up.
And that filmmaker Florian Zeller just has a new movie that just played at Venice, The Sun, which also sounds like it will crush me.
Yeah, well, I just read that it's a prequel. I didn't know that they were related. I thought it was just a coincidence that it was called The Sun.
Right.
Because I looked it up on IMDb when I saw that. Like, none of the characters' names are this. So I'm like, so is it like maybe it's one of those like where they're just like slightly related to the family or something? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But it's based on his plays that he wrote. Like he wrote the play first.
Mm-hmm. So The Father was a Frank Langella Tony winner a decade ago.
Oh, okay. So he does the play first, Tony Award winning, and then later on is making the film versions. That's cool. It got mixed reviews. Like I read some stuff that's like, oh yeah, that's not getting any Oscar nominations. So we'll see. I love the cast. So and I thought The Father was so great that I have high hopes for The Son. But yeah, so yeah, it's really Sounder, an important film in the history of Black cinema, in the history of the Oscars. This is still the only year up until Ma Rainey's Black Bottom year that we had 2 Black actresses nominated for best actress at the Oscars. Lady Sings the Blues with Diana Ross. Diana Ross also gets in that year. So we had, of the 5 for best actress in this for 73 ceremony, we had both Tyson and Diana Ross, which I'm talking the Diana Ross film in a couple weeks. And I'm
have you seen that movie?
No, I've never seen it.
It's incredible. Speaking of trauma, that's a traumatic film. That's going to feel the opposite of this.
Okay. And
great movie.
And what I find crazy about that, so she's playing Billie Holiday, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the second time we get 2 Black actresses in the actress category is when we have Andra Day playing Billie Holiday
in that dreadful Lee Daniels movie.
The Lee Daniels movie that I struggled with that one.
Dreadful.
2020 was actually a great year for Black cinema. There was a lot of terrific end of the year films. Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, the Regina King movie was amazing.
Beale Street.
No, not Beale Street.
Sorry. One Night in Miami.
One Night in Miami. I just blanked on the title. One Night in Miami was really good, and just great performances, great stories being told. And so that finally we got a second year where we had two actresses, Black actresses up for best actress. But I just don't know if anyone was going to beat Liza Minnelli. That's just such a great performance. It's the only time I think she was nominated for an Oscar. Liza Minnelli. I think that was
like what else would she be nominated for? Stepping Out?
That was her one and done, you know?
Yeah.
And sometimes that I kind of like that sometimes when an actor just comes in, just blows you out of the water, and that's it. And then they get the Oscar for it. It's like, it's okay. It doesn't have to be, you know, the Meryl Streep, like always getting nominated for everything. But she didn't make a lot of films, Liza Minnelli. Like we talked about her career at the end of that episode, and she's in like 7 other films, like something like that. She's not in very much. I don't know how. It's like you do cabaret. It's like, what do you do next?
Exactly. Like she does Broadway. She does
Broadway.
It's called Red. It's not called Red. Something like that. Yeah.
But so a couple other things. So we talked about the remake that came out in 2003. There was a sequel to Sounder with the most bizarre title. It's called Part 2, the numeral 2, comma, Sounder. And that was released in 1976. And it had a couple like minor like actors from Sounder who reprised their roles. But I'm like, why would you make a sequel 4 years later and you don't even have the same major cast from the movie?
Yeah, I like the Wikipedia. It says it was barely released.
Like, you know, I mean, it could have been like its own like Godfather Part 2. Like, what if there had been a Sounder Part 2 in 1974 and it had Tyson and it had Winfield, and it was like a story with a lot of drama, and I feel like there could have been a sequel about that family. There was more to say, I think, about that family, but I don't know about.
Let our imaginations do the rest.
True. Yeah. Well, you know, they're always looking. They're like, well, this Sounder, it was the 10th highest grossing movie. What if we made a second one?
Stupid privatized art.
Why would you make one 4 years later? It's like, what was that? Oh, Love Story, biggest hit of 1970, and then they release a sequel, Oliver Story, in 1978.
I didn't know there was a sequel.
There's a sequel 8 years later, and it's like him dealing with the grief of the loss from the first movie.
Okay, and that makes sense.
It's Ryan O'Neal again.
That times out really well with the rise of video, because Love Story is probably a huge video hit too.
In 77, 78?
No, I'm saying like after. So when's the sequel come out?
The sequel's 78. The first one's 70.
Oh, okay, so I'm off. Okay,
but I'm like, that's if you're gonna make an 8 years later sequel, it doesn't. I don't know if it feels right to be about the grief you're feeling about the loss from the person who died at the end of the first one.
No,
like it's a little long. Not to say you can't make decades later sequels. I mean, sometimes they work, like it did with Top Gun. like people will go and people will love it, but I feel like a Sounder sequel should have had the same cast and it should have been 2 years later, not 4.
Right.
But and then the last thing was last year, the film was selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry by the Library of Congress for being culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant. So I always forget how many movies they picked for that each year. It's not like more than 20, right? It's like 15 to 20, maybe 30.
Right. I never count.
Okay, it's not a lot. It's not like they're picking 200 titles. It's usually like between like 15 to 25, something like that. But last
maybe
year they picked Sounder.
Yeah, but like maybe they could pick more. I don't know what's stopping them.
You're like, why stop at 20? Make it 200. Right. Let's just do this.
Just do whatever number works.
I think then it would maybe people would think like it loses its luster, like they're not as significant of titles if they're picking too many. If all of a sudden they're including what's a bad movie from the late 90s? I'm like Volcano.
I was gonna say Virus.
Virus. Even Jamie Lee has gone on record saying that's a piece of shit.
Yeah.
which is why I love Jamie
No,
Lee.
see, the thing is, I would want to preserve Volcano with Dante's Peak. I want to preserve all those pairings from the 90s.
Volcano. I mean, that was fun, but like to see that chosen by the Library of Congress, I
think it's historically significant, especially R.I.P. N.H. put her in the Library of Congress.
That's true. I was always team Dante's Peak. I think that's a better movie.
Oh, totally. And now that I live in Washington, everybody here is obsessed with it the way they are with Twin Peaks and Northern Exposure. They love Dante's Peak up here. Oh,
Dante's Peak is big up in Seattle?
Huge.
Like you bring that title up and they start like jumping up and down.
Yeah. Oh, it's a classic up here.
They're like, oh my God, I just watched it again last week. And let's talk about it.
Absolutely. I'm being absolutely honest about this.
Yeah. So as we kind of get to the end of our conversation about sound, or anything else you wanted to add about the movie, any other scenes or moments, or it's not a movie where you're like, oh, these are the 5 great scenes. It doesn't work like that. It's just kind of like, it's got a nice progression. The performances are strong. It's not a movie where you're like, oh, you got like these 3 scenes are just, that's where you're just on the floor crying. It's not really that kind of movie. It kind of goes on one line of, throughout, like there's never a moment of like crazy hysterics. Like the most would be when she's running towards her husband, but even that's dialed down.
Yeah, the movie's built around 3 conversations between David Lee and Nathan Lee, and those are all wonderful. I like it's a single shot when we see him at his first school. It starts on the very white teacher, very drone reading Huck Finn, and a horrible passage from it too.
That's right. They read from Huck Finn.
They read from Huck Finn, and then it goes to the classroom, which is definitely segregated, and then it ends on David Lee in the back, just looking bored out of his mind. And I like the power. I like this movie doesn't over-explain itself. Not that it's complicated, but it doesn't feel the need to over-explain and be overwrought about anything. It just sort of lets these things happen, which I really like. I like emotions in a movie. Like I'm a big emotions person. I'm an emotions connoisseur, but I also like when something can just let things happen and let you sort of live and feel around in it and find the emotions that way. And that's a scene that's very good about this. I love when Cicely goes to the jail and is turned away. I love when David Lee has his talk with Miss Camille, the teacher. That's the most overwrought scene in the movie, because she's like, let me tell you about famous Black Americans, but it's handled really well. And again, I don't think with the score.
Oh, right.
It's like you said, it's more just a vibe, which is what I really responded to. And like I said before, the plot doesn't kick into gear until 25 minutes in when the sheriff shows up. And then the sheriff tries to shoot Sounder. Which of course shocked the hell out of me. I was not expecting that in this G-rated movie.
And the dog's injured and it goes missing for a while, right? And it's not G-rated.
No, in the book, like when David Lee finally finds Sounder again, like it can only use 3 legs, it's missing an ear and it's missing an eye, and doesn't bark at all.
Oh wow. Okay. That might have been too much for the movie.
Too much. Whereas in this and spoiler alert for the book from 1969, after Nathan Lee comes back, he dies.
After the father comes back?
After the father comes back, the father dies a little bit later, after they've had their heart-to-heart, and then Sounder dies.
What?
Right. So I mean, like when Nathan Lee came back, he says, oh, my leg is injured. And I wrote down in my notes, in all caps, do you see the titular symbol? So the book goes even further. So this book probably traumatized millions of children.
Do you know why he dies? Like just from his injury?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay, because it doesn't look that debilitating. It looks like it's hard for him to do his work, but it doesn't look like he's dying from his injury in the movie. So I think they made the right choice there. That would have been too much.
I agree.
And then the dog dies, and then he leaves for his new school, and then roll credits. Might have been too much. I really like. I mean, I don't know. It's hard to compare. I mean, these are very different Best Picture nominees. Like I don't know how you compare Sounder with Cabaret and The Godfather. They're 3 completely different films that all are very successful in what they're doing.
And then you said it's The Emigrants, and what's the last one?
And Deliverance.
Oh fuck! Excuse me.
Why do you like that? Do you like Deliverance?
No, I love Deliverance, but Sounder and Deliverance. You're speaking of different tones. That's what I was laughing about.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
The
just, you
first
just,
was a film I'd never seen before. I watched it in July and I loved it.
it's great, right?
I loved it.
It hurts my feelings. Oh my God. It's a rough movie.
Another movie that's really suspenseful without banging you over the head with a loud music score.
Yeah.
Like there's lots of stretches where it's just silent.
It's just the sounds of nature and some assholes coming for you.
Yeah. It's like the River Wild of the early 70s, and I really enjoyed it.
God, that's I don't know if I can rewatch that movie. That's a rough movie.
Yeah. I mean, the scene at the beginning was tough, and again, as I talked about on that podcast, like the director does not, John Gorman, he does not like shove that in your face. You're just kind of expected to watch it, and it's happening in real time, and it's disgusting and horrific, and the way he lets that play out, like, you know, you're watching just a reality happening in front. Like I thought that was done really well, and it's great acting in that movie. One of Burt Reynolds' best performances I'd seen of him. So that was the thrill. I really like. I kind of thought I was gonna like that one. Like going in, I'm like, I think this will be for me.
Can you imagine that double bill, Sounder and Deliverance?
Yeah. I mean, it's a really great group of films. I think that if there's one of the 5 nominated Best Picture movies that's closest to Sounder, it would be The Emigrants. It's also about a family and their journey of self-discovery, and so that's like the closest one. But even that's pretty different in terms of its tone and things. So, but like it's a great collection of 5 films.
Yeah. People talk about how like 76 is like maybe the best year of Best Picture nominees. And I love 78, including Rocky, but 72, that kind of comes out of nowhere because people just talk about Cabaret and The Godfather.
Yeah, some years you have 1 or 2 great choices, and then you have 3 others that are kind of meh, and that's not the case here. All are really strong. There's not one bad film in the bunch, which is really great.
Lovely. Yeah, 70s.
So yeah, I really like Sounder. I was happy to finally watch it. And now I've seen all 5 of the Best Picture nominees, and curious to see what's coming up next for the next 4 months. Movies that did not get into picture. Hopefully there's some treasures there, but we'll get into it. So that takes us to our final 2 segments. The first one's a divine double feature. What would you pair with Sounder? What do you think would go well with this movie that's a little bit more modern today?
So, you know, I like to go with like art house films. Just to, I
you always surprise me with something.
There is this one at Tribeca, and it played at SIFF. It is called Burning Cane from 2019.
Okay.
And it is by Philip Yaumans, who was 17 when he made this movie.
Okay.
It is a Black Louisiana set film, and it's about a religious mother, and she's trying to deal with her self-destructive son and the alcoholic pastor. So it has Wendell Pierce is the lead from Treme and The Wire and the upcoming All Black Death of the Salesman on Broadway. And then this director went to NYU, and he actually doesn't like the fact that you say, like, the big deal is he directed this as a teenager. He's like, I made a movie, like it shouldn't be a big deal. But this is from a Black male director who made, like, it's clearly made by somebody young. Like there are some mistakes, but I haven't stopped thinking about it for 3 years. And that is called Burning Cane from 2019. If you want like a really independent Black cinema vibe, that one.
I just looked it up on IMDb. It's got a gorgeous poster. It looks really cool. And so yeah, this, like, in terms of like the tone, it's fairly quiet, kind of along the same tone of Sounder.
It's more intense than that.
A little bit more intense.
It's still a vibe.
Okay, cool. I went with a modern Black film that is completely different in tone. I just finally got around to watching it about a month ago. I always miss a few titles, and I make a project for myself every time. Like the next year, I put on my phone like notes. I put like in alphabetical order, just like it's usually 30 plus titles from the previous year I missed before I made my top 10 list or did whatever. So I finally watched The Harder They Fall on Netflix.
The Netflix Western.
The Netflix Western with an incredible cast, and talk about stylish and big and violent, R-rated, almost completely, I want to say, a Black cast.
Yep.
And a Black filmmaker. And I didn't know what to expect. It was, I want to say it was considered a potential Oscar contender, and it came to Netflix, and then it just kind of fizzled out. So I thought, oh, it must not be very good. I put it on, like, we'll give it a half hour. Let's see how it is. And I was completely like transfixed the whole movie. I really loved it. It has great characters and a couple 2 to 3 action sequences, shootouts that are spectacular. Was like blew me away. Were fantastic. And Regina King plays like this kind of smarmy, kind of villainous character in it, and she's having a great time. And I loved watching her performance in the movie. She gets some battles like to the death in the film that are really cool. There's this scene on a train where they're trying to rob it, and it's really suspenseful. It's towards the beginning. I remember that scene well. That was great. And the shootout at the end, I mean, I would say it goes on for 15 plus minutes, and it's like, it's just spectacular. So I thought, I was like, I feel like I would pick a modern film by a Black filmmaker, Black cast, that's, you know, maybe a little bit more in touch with like the kinds of films that are being made today, that go against the kind of quieter tone of Sounder, and shows you kind of how these films have evolved over 50 years. And so it would have been 49 years. And I really, really enjoyed it. I would have given it 3.5 stars out of 4. I really liked it. So for anyone who somehow missed it, it's on Netflix. It's really good. The Harder They Fall. I really like it.
And like any Netflix movie that will play a couple theaters like that one did, those are the ones to sort of pay attention to. So like that played in Bellevue for a little bit. I didn't see it in theaters. I wish I would have, but my wife wanted to watch it, and she has way less free time than I do. So we watched that on Netflix. I really want to see what's next from that filmmaker, you know, Seal's brother.
Oh, Seal's brother. So his name is James Samuel.
Yeah. So yeah, Seal is his older brother, and they,
cool.
They're both musicians.
Oh, interesting. Is this his first feature?
I think so.
I can look him up real quick, but
no, I'm on the page right now.
So the cast in that film, Jonathan Majors is really great.
Yeah, I love Jonathan Majors. He's in a new airplane movie with Glenn Powell.
Okay. And
I just saw a trailer.
And Lakeith Stanfield's really good in The Harder They Fall. He also plays kind of villainous character, and I really enjoyed him in the movie too. He's one of those actors I get excited when he shows up in something. Like he always brings something new and fresh to every role I see of him. I was happy for him to get that surprise Oscar nomination for Judas and the Black Messiah in supporting actor.
And he didn't cancel out the other person in the category. Well, both lead performances.
Rarely do 2 lead performances both end up in the supporting category, but you know, sometimes you just got to slip that person in there. If they're, you know, they're not going to be nominated in lead, so throw it in supporting, and there you go.
Totally.
Very cool. So yeah, so 2 good titles there. And then I thought we'd end just talking a little bit more about Cicely Tyson. So what else have you seen of her work?
I've seen a bunch.
As I said before, we need to do better with Cicely Tyson. I want to seek out that 1974 TV movie she's in that won her the Emmy. She's got
Autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman.
Yeah, I want to see that. And there's some TV films she made throughout the years. I feel like sometimes TV movies get a bad rap. Anything made before like 2000. Sometimes the quality of the film's not as good, but I've sometimes you can find some gems there. And any lead roles she was in, especially in film and TV, I'd love to check it out. So what have you seen?
And I'm going to have a top 3. Okay. But I went out of my way. I'm like, I'm not going to choose The Help. Like one of her last roles. I'm like, oh, I have to do more research because I know her mostly like her last 10-15 years, which is The Help and a bunch of Tyler Perry movies where she's good in them. But you know, Tyler Perry is a fascinating filmmaker, and you know, half of his things are really not good, but they're never boring. They're always weird, and she's always pretty good in them. But it's you know, these movies are not made for me, so I should stop talking about them. That's fine. Like too much art is made for me, and I wish less art was made for me.
Yeah.
And she's also in this wonderful Richard Linklater movie called Last Flag Flying from 2017, which was the unofficial sequel to Last Detail. And she's the mother at the end. Okay. But I did my third one, I'll say this, it's not a good movie, but I think it's historically relevant. From 1976, The Bluebird by George Cukor, starring her, Elizabeth Taylor, and Jane Fonda.
Oh. How do I not know this movie?
Because it was never released in the United States.
Oh, okay.
On video. It is the first Soviet-U.S. co-production during the Cold War. And it is a retelling of The Bluebird, the fable, the French fable. This is like the 4th or 5th one. Shirley Temple made a version of it 50 years earlier. And this is a movie where Cicely Tyson plays a cat. It is sort of
a cat.
Yes. So it's like two children, like Elizabeth Taylor plays their mother, Light, a witch, and a bunch of other things. And they have to look for the bluebird of happiness, and they can turn all their household objects into living beings in sort of a weird, like ballet nutcracker style. And they touch their cat, and then it becomes Cicely Tyson, who's in a cat outfit, and then she starts licking the young child. So this is, imagine a Russian film made with American actors. George Cukor was a replacement for Arthur Penn because Russia said Arthur Penn was too liberal of a filmmaker. This is a movie where the guy playing the dog, I forget his name. He's James Coco from Man of La Mancha. He played Sancho Panza. He could not eat the Russian food, so he instead accidentally poisoned himself and got too big on bread. Elizabeth Taylor fired the cinematographer who had never worked in color before and made her look awful. And George Cukor accused Cicely Tyson of voodoo.
Oh.
And this is a movie where just every single thing went wrong, and you can tell on screen. But it's like, that sequence in Labyrinth, the dream sequence at the ballroom as the world falls down? Imagine that for like 95 minutes. This is an oddity. I found it at Scarecrow Video. The only disc they have was the Russian disc.
Oh.
They have English subtitles and English special features, but it has only been released in Russia. And Cicely Tyson, this is like near the end of her very big career. I highly recommend looking for The Bluebird from 1976. If you want this is like family films that end up being nightmares, I adore. And this is one of them.
That's awesome.
The second one, I watched a movie called A Hero Ain't Nothing But a Sandwich from 1977, reuniting Cicely Tyson and Paul Winfield.
Oh, okay.
This is a novel by Alice Childress, the playwright, and she adapted it herself. And this is from the director Ralph Nelson, who did Lilies of the Field and Charlie, Requiem for a Heavyweight, Duel at Diablo. And this is about a Black family in South Los Angeles, and the 12-year-old boy, the lead, who is Lamar from Revenge of the Nerds. He gets addicted to heroin, and it feels like a TV movie, even though it came out in theaters. But I chose it because it's a nice reunion between these two actors. And back then, these independent Black films like this and like Penitentiary and MMA, Emma May is the name of the movie. There's these, and what's his name? He made Killer of Sheep and some Danny Glover movies. There are these tiny little Black independent movies that are just really nice and lived in and kind of get buried in history, and this is one of them. Alice Childress is also an important playwright because she wrote Trouble in Mind in the 50s and was going to go to Broadway, but they would only let her go to Broadway if she changed the ending to be like happier and less anti-white people, and she refused. So it was only revived on Broadway last year. That's the first time it ever actually made it to Broadway. Was 65 years later.
Interesting.
That's Alice Childress. The movie is A Hero Ain't Nothing But a Sandwich.
And her name is Sweets?
I didn't.
Is that what I read? No. I saw it on IMDb. What am I thinking?
Oh, right. Yeah.
Her name's Sweet.
And she's the mother. Yeah, it's cool. Clearly John Singleton has seen this movie.
Okay.
It has that really, really cool vibe to it. And like, it's not great, but I found it kind of fascinating. Okay. So I chose things where she has like major lead roles.
Okay, cool.
And then my number one pick is 1966's A Man Called Adams, starring Sammy Davis Jr., which is about an ill, drug-addicted, drunken trumpet player who destroys his own life, and she plays a civil rights leader who he dates on and off. This movie also has Louis Armstrong in it, like late in his career, playing another trumpeter. And this is directed by Leo Penn, father of Sean Penn, Chris Penn, and Michael Penn.
Oh, okay.
And it's part of like his trumpet playing is dubbed, but Sammy Davis clearly studied it, and they get into the process of making this movie in Karina Longworth's You Must Remember This. 2 miniseries ago, they covered the bios of Sammy Davis Jr. and Dean Martin. And so this is sort of near the end of Sammy Davis Jr.'s career. So you get to see him lay it all out in this really intense black and white film.
And it's black and white? Nice.
Yeah, and a great jazz movie. Half the movie's just spent on the performances. And what works about this is Cicely Tyson at this point is on and off the girlfriend of Miles Davis.
Oh, okay.
And she is, of course, the cover album art for his album Sorcerer. Speaking of her being gorgeous,
Oh, wow.
she's the face of one of the greatest albums of all time. They were dating when they made this and they broke up, and then they got married in 81, divorced in 89, and then he died 2 years later. So if you want to see like her taking out her Miles Davis frustrations on Sammy Davis Jr., here's this really cool. I love jazz movies. I love anything that is about music that's not a biopic. A Man Called Adam from 1966.
Okay. Those are I just looked it up on IMDb. The cast is amazing. Louis Armstrong, like acting alongside Sammy Davis Jr., Ossie Davis. And
Ossie Davis is wonderful in it. Louis, I've been watching a lot of Louis Armstrong movies because Turner Classic Movies likes to show his old things. And I just want to give a shout out to this great movie from 1947 called New Orleans, which is him and Billie Holiday's only film performance. Speaking of Billie Holiday.
Billie Holiday was in one film?
Was in one film as an actress.
What? It's called what?
It's called New Orleans from 1947. It is about the riot. It's about the fall of Storyville, the section of New Orleans around World War I, where they allowed prostitution and gambling. The movie's not about prostitution because it was made in the 40s. So it's a gambling den with loose women, but it's incredible. And a lot of it is just Louis blowing on his horn.
That's cool. I love like when someone's like that famous and they have one film credit. That's always interesting to just see like what was it about that project that got them in, and then they never acted again in a film. That's really cool. And I have not seen those titles. You go through her IMDb and it's mostly television and it's a lot of episodic, and then like every 10 titles you'll see like a film title. I'm really curious about this movie from 1981 called Bustin' Loose with Richard Pryor. Do you know anything about this?
I almost watched it, but I read some bad notices for it.
Oh, bad notices.
It seems like a road trip on a bus with, as they called it at the time, special children. So it seems like a weird schmaltzy weepy.
Okay.
And I had limited time this week, and I didn't want to see where she like gets overshadowed by like this weird little mushy nonsense.
Okay.
I will watch it.
I'm also curious about Ms. Scrooge, a retelling of A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens with Cicely Tyson and Katherine Hellman from 1997. So yeah, I've seen Fried Green Tomatoes. It's been a long time. I really enjoyed that film when it came out just a little bit early. It was 91, so I didn't see it in the theater, but I did catch up with it later. I like that one. She's in there. I saw Hoodlum when I was younger, and I really enjoyed that. That's Lawrence Fishburne. Tim Roth, and I think is Andy Garcia in that one. Yeah, Andy Garcia.
I watched it 2 days ago. I had never seen it. I don't know why I didn't see it in 97. I would have been primed for that. That's middle school for me. I loved it.
Yeah,
movies aren't made like this anymore.
Vanessa Williams, which is like, her film career, like her big like action movie release was Eraser with Schwarzenegger in 96. And then I think this was her first film after that. And
Queen Latifah's in it.
Queen Latifah, Cicely Tyson plays Stephanie St. Clair, and that's so I need to catch up on.
She plays Madame Queen, who is the West Indies woman who runs the racketeering in Harlem in the 1930s. And then when she gets put away, Bumpy Johnson, Lawrence Fishburne, reprising his role from Cotton Club, takes over and accidentally starts a gang war with Dutch, Tim Roth, and she is great in it. And she's only in like the first 30 minutes and then has one jail cell scene later.
Okay.
But once she disappears, the energy definitely shifts.
Oh, okay.
And that is all three I chose were white filmmakers, and I almost chose Hoodlum because that's by Bill Duke.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Who's a great black actor and filmmaker.
So that's one to revisit. I feel like I've seen the movie The Comedians from 1967. That is the one with Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor, that long stretch where they were making lots and lots of films together. I believe that year they were in 3 movies, I want to say, like they were working together a lot. And then the one I saw for its 50th anniversary, I really enjoyed it, was one of my favorite discoveries for 68. And that was The Heart is a Lonely Hunter. Have you seen that with Alan Arkin and it's got some Oscar nominations. I want to say it got two. Yeah, I got two Oscar nominations. The other one for Sandra Locke, and it's just like this really kind of a quiet, kind of like Sounder, quiet kind of drama. He plays like a mute. He's a deaf mute who moves to a new town to be near his friend. And it's got a great cast. She is the daughter of a doctor, I want to say, in the movie. Mm-hmm. And she doesn't have a lot to do in that movie, but I remember her being a nice addition to that roster of great talent and just terrific drama from '68. I would recommend that one.
Yeah, and that is, I want to see it because it's based on a novel by Carson McCullers.
Yes.
Who wrote Member of the Wedding. And I just watched a few weeks ago Reflections in a Golden Eye with Liz Taylor and Marlon Brando and Robert Forster. So the reason I didn't watch it this week, other than it being 2.5 hours long, is that my wife really wants to see all the Carson McCullers movies now that we've seen Reflections in a Golden Eye.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And I saw that she was like seventh billed. I'm like, okay, priorities. I really want to see it. The title's always stuck with me.
Yeah, so these are all great titles to look into. The like when I think of her now, my partner and I watched every episode of How to Get Away with Murder. And it's not a movie, but Cicely Tyson played Viola Davis's mother, and it wasn't just a one-off episode. She was in a lot. I want to say it was at least 10 plus episodes throughout the series run. And any episode that she played a big role in, like, was always one of the series' best. And I want to say there was one where they get into a screaming match. And this is Cicely Tyson in her 90s, and she is holding her own against Viola Davis, one of our great actors of today. And it's an ABC long-running series that's very big on plot and murder and mayhem and all those things. But whenever the series slowed down to tell that mother-daughter story, I was most riveted of all. And I thought she was amazing. I think she won at least one Emmy for that, if not more than one. And so if you never saw How to Get Away with Murder, or at least take a look at some of the episodes with Tyson in that. I really loved her in that.
Yeah, but I was kind of waiting for that show to end because, like, I can only really watch one Shonda show at a time.
Okay,
maybe two. And Grey's Anatomy apparently is never going away. So I'm still catching up on Scandal, and then I'll watch How to Get Away with Murder.
Oh, so you haven't seen How to Get Away with Murder?
No, not yet, which is weird because that's kind of right in my wheelhouse.
It's the first season is amazing, and then it starts. I mean, like every season, there's a murder. You try to figure out who did it and what happened. And the first season, it's like the perfect kind of 360 of like, okay, here's who died. Finally, by the end, you find out like who did it and why it happened. And Viola Davis, you know, this was like her big like television project, and she brings it her all every episode. And I don't know if Cicely Tyson is in season 1, but she eventually comes in as her mother, and they've got some great scenes, great storylines together. I was just wanted to look real quick how many episodes she's in of that, because as I said, it wasn't just like one. It was, so 10, 11, 12, 30. She was in 15 episodes. Nice. So it's a lot. It's a long run. And there'll be sometimes like half a season where you don't see her, but then she'll come in and she'll be in like 4 in a row. And she's just works really well alongside Viola Davis. I remember when Viola Davis won the SAG Award for Best Actress in 2012 for The Help. She said like the person who inspired her to become an actress was Cicely Tyson. And she was in the room because the whole cast from The Help was nominated for Best Ensemble. And after she says that, the camera cuts to Cicely Tyson, and she is in tears, standing in the audience, just beside herself. I've always really treasured that moment. And that speech that Viola Davis gave there, so that would have been 10 years ago. That was when I first was like, who is this Cicely Tyson? What has she done to inspire Viola Davis to become an actress? And, you know, there's still a lot for us to see, but I thank you for those titles you watched. And there's still a lot more to discover with her extraordinary career. Going back to her film debut was 1957, and she was acting all the way to the end, and she just passed away last year. So there's a lot to discover. All right, that takes us to the end here, Marcus. Thanks for being my guest again on Film at 50. I know you have a lot of projects going on right now, so I'd love for you to plug anything you want to plug, talk about what's going on in your creative life right now.
Sure. We are currently filming a play of mine We're using a local fringe theater sort of as a studio, and that's called How to Leave. So we're in the middle of shooting. We don't know when it'll be done. Hopefully by the end of the year. And these are it's for intermingling monologues about like people at different points in their relationship. And we're halfway through the cast right now. It's good. It's during the pandemic, monologue plays work because you have only one person on stage at a time, and that's very helpful.
Yes.
I am currently writing. I'm covering film, theater, and some burlesque for something called The Ticket, which is presented by the Seattle Times. If you go to theticket.seattletimes.com, you will see my stuff. I cover like 4 films, 4 plays, and some features per month. And we're just getting started up. And it's sort of like we're the cool end of the Seattle Times. We're not following their house style, and it's wild. And we have like, TikTok and stuff like that. By the time this comes out, I will have had my first public reading of the play I wrote in the pandemic called Gold, which is about a 19-year-old woman. Her grandfather dies and she inherits his little black book and finds out he's had all these affairs over the last 40, 50 years. And in order to figure out her family and discover herself, she goes on a road trip across the country to meet his mistresses.
Okay.
So that will be happening. This will have come out by then, but that's 9/18 at 18th and Union during their Portable Performance Festival, a full month of performances that, as long as you can break them down in 10 minutes, do whatever floats your boat and, get people into this 50-60 house theater. And I am about to start doing, I'm volunteering for Make Believe Seattle, a brand new genre film festival that will happen next March in Seattle from the guy who co-created Scripts Gone Wild. He is now the executive director of $3 Bill Cinema, which is the gay cinema organization in Seattle. See me on a future commercial that might be about our local football team that I shot this week that I can't say too much about. And I'm doing a million things. I'm volunteering. Go to grandillusioncinema.org, which is a local 70-seat art house theater that I'm currently volunteering at, doing concessions on Saturday matinees. Great theater. And of course, always check out sif.net. We have 5 screens with the Seattle International Film Festival, and our festival will be in May next year. So a long time. That's why I'm not in Toronto now, because who needs to be in Toronto in September? Those movies will come out by the time my festival starts.
Oh, okay.
And there's at least 3 other things I'm doing right now that I can't even think of. Right now, I'm going to as many weekday Mariners games as possible.
Okay.
Love taking the light rail down at noon, having a couple beers, seeing the Mariners, who are doing really well this year, and then being home by 5. Lovely thing to do on a Wednesday afternoon.
That sounds great. I love that idea. Cool. Well, thanks for sharing all that, and thanks for fitting me into your busy schedule there, Marcus. You've got a lot going on, so it's always fun to talk movies with you. Love to have you on again at some point. So thanks for being here, Marcus. Thanks to all of you for listening. You can find us online at filmat50.com. We're on Twitter and Instagram. Check out my YouTube channel, Brian Rowe Video. And until next time, remember, 50 never looked this good.